have to back down for the moment because he's really crazy, and so even like starting like right there, because this is like one of those moments where you also see how they feel about humans.
Yeah. When all the gods are seated, Hera announces, "Kinfolk, we must give up. Zeus is our lord, our tyrant, and we must submit. He's planning to kill many of our favorite humans, and," she sighs, "there's nothing we can do about it." She turns to Ares, takes his dirty, blood-stained hand, and says, "Poor Ares, did you know those cruel Trojans have killed your son, Ascalaphus?" And Ares goes into a fit right at the table. He roars, "I'll kill those Trojans! I'll kill every one of them! I don't care what my father says. I don't care if he hits me with a lightning bolt. I'm going down to Troy right now." He stomps out to hitch up his foul and eerie horses, panic and terror. Athena says to Hera, "Mother, you know he'll just get hurt." Hera runs out after Ares. As easily as a mother takes her baby's cap off, she yanks a huge helmet from his head, slides the shield at his grip, and finally wrenches away his spear. As she undresses him, she scolds, "Stupid boy, have you lost your mind? Father Zeus could squeeze you like a bunch of grapes. And if you make him angry, he'll come here and do the same to all of us." Ares whines, "But they killed my son." She laughs. "What was his name, if you care so much about him?" He scratches his filthy, blood-encrusted hair, then mumbles, "It started with an A, I'm pretty sure." She grabs him by the scruff of the neck and leads him back to the banquet hall, saying, "Just forget about your son. Not that it matters, but his name was Ascalaphus, and he was nothing special. Better men than him have died in battle."
Yeah.
I'd like to do this if we didn't have one more. We have some time, and then we'll do a Q&A. But because we focus more on the comedy, which is what makes it so much fun to read, and a bit of the gore, but we haven't really got to much of the pathos. Although I think there is some pathos just in knowing how contemptuous the gods are of us poor mortals. But there are some really kind of more profoundly pathos scenes in the book. Is there one that you might want to read, and then we'll open it up?
I don't know if we'll do the same one as last time.
Yeah.
People up. Okay, I don't want to bore people with some stuff. Okay. Okay.
I love that.
Okay. I mentioned what happens at the end where Priam, who is a good king. That's one of the ironies of the text. The defeated is a good king. The winner is a bad king. Priam is going back to get Hector's body, and he's been basically promised a divine safe conduct. And to make sure that works, Zeus sends Hermes along. Hermes has been staying out of this. He's kept his good humor. So give me a second here, and I'll try to find the right moment. Okay. Right. Here's where Hermes meets Priam. Priam and his old servant are terrified of meeting some of the brigands that haunt the battlefield. So when old Idaeus, squinting ahead, cries out, "Lord Priam, there's a man standing by the bank. Should we try to flee?" Priam feels his old heart pound like it's about to come up out of his throat. He can't even answer, let alone slap the reins to make the mules run. Hermes can barely hide his laughter as he watches the old men shiver and shake. He runs to them, asking in a well-bred young man's voice, "Oh, uncle, why are you driving a wagon full of loot through this wilderness prowled by brigands?" Priam stands there in the darkness, holding back the mules. They want to get to the water, and they're pulling the feeble old man toward the stream in spite of himself. His mouth is wide open with fear. His servant hides behind him like a shy toddler. Hermes stifles his laughter and goes on in a self-righteous tone. "Poor uncle, I see you are well stricken in years. Yes, very well stricken indeed. Do you not fear marauding Greeks? They may take your goods and abuse your daughter, is it standing there behind you? Though I perceive that she too is well stricken in years. Priam can only groan in terror. Hermes pats the old king on the back, then puts one hand on his sword, striking a grand heroic pose. Have no fear, aged sir, I shall be your savior, for you remind me of my own dear father. But this changes very rapidly. Hermes has his fun, but and like, for example, Priam is trying to figure out who this young man is, and he says gratefully, "Oh, I'm sure your lineage is of the noblest." Hermes cocks his pretty head and murmurs, "We are indeed a well-established family on both sides of the bed." It finally, where's that line I wanted to get to? I'm trying to keep this fast for you. Okay, Priam stammered to Hermes. You're Achilles' squire? Hermes bows politely. At your service, aged sir. Priam sobs. Then may I ask you, have the dogs eaten my son's body? Hermes suddenly pities the old man. Dropping his ironic manner, he says in his true voice, King Priam, I promise you the dogs have not touched your son, nor has his corpse rotted. Indeed, his wounds have all closed. Your son is beloved by the gods.
Let's open it up to some questions. If anybody has any questions in here, yes, you, sir.
Simple question: what are meter and prosody?
The rhythm of the original text. We have this in English, but in a slightly different way. Like if you imagine, prosody is a more general, vague term. Like when you do the lit crit biz for a while, you realize we have a whole field of intentionally vague terms, and prosody just means roughly how the whole thing sounds. Meter means a specific rule of rhymed verse with roughly similar line lengths. The most perfect example in modern English that I can think of is a poem that people all used to have to read at some point. I don't know if people still do, called "Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening" by Robert Frost. And here you'll hear the meter in this. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. That's the meter, and the prosody also involves the rhyme scheme, which is, I recall, is A-A-A-B. That is, the first three lines rhyme with each other. The fourth line of each stanza rhymes with the fourth line of the next stanza. There are a million variations on this. The original Iliad was supposedly rendered in very tightly ruled verse form, but it was also sung to the accompaniment of a musical instrument. And my view is that the audience would have found it weird to hear an a cappella Iliad, let alone a written Iliad of which they have no idea.
It was metered and under strict rhyming rules and stuff, because that would have helped people memorize it too, right? In a way.
Yeah, there are two mnemonic devices that were used in the Iliad, and as Lord, Harry, and others have said, are used or were used until recently by other performers of oral epic. One was the prosody, and we still do this, even though we have an aversion to poetry in most forms. We still use rhyme and meter as mnemonic devices. Like, a lot of times they don't work, but the idea is 30 days have September, April, June, and wait, what's the other one? November. That was because the rhyme helped people remember the months, except there are too many months that end with the same sound, so it isn't very effective. A stitch in time saves 9. It's not even a very good rhyme, but it's trying to be a rhyme, and that's supposed to help you remember. So that was one. The other one is repeated phrases, rosy-fingered dawn being the most famous one. And if you've ever performed a long text, you know, and this is still done in some places. I used to teach in New Zealand where there was a prize for the student who did the memorization of the longest poem. This 13-year-old girl won for reciting without error the poem The Highwayman. And if you know that poem, it's like 400 stanzas long. It's incredible. So people can still do this. But one of the other ways they did it was to use repeated phrases, I suspect, in part as a better way of going, hold on. It sounds better if you do the rosy-fingered dawn, and then you can go over that. You probably also used whatever musical instrument you had, because these are feats of memory you're performing. You're going to be judged on those feats of memory. But I swear, and I'd stake my life on it, you're also going to be adapting the text, amplifying some parts, and cutting other parts to suit the audience. The one part that I had to cut was the catalog of the ships, because it bores me, and the rest of the Iliad does not bore me. So I cut it.
Any other questions?
If you like.
First of all, thank you so much. My husband is a huge fan of the show. Through him, I've listened to some of the episodes, one of which was on Tajikistan. And I'm from Tajikistan, and some of the people would recognize the country because they listen to the podcast. Thank you. What a little comment on in the excerpt that you read, you mentioned that Peter referred to Kira's mother.
Yeah,
She's not her mother.
She's not. I know.
Was a comedic kind of?
No, that's one of the strange features of the text. They're a very tight duo, and it's always framed as mother and daughter. She's not her mother. Zeus, if you like, is her mother, in that Athena chewed her way out of poor bastard's skull. And I think that's one of the reasons Zeus is not really afraid of anybody, but he's careful with Athena. If there's anyone he's really worried about, it's her, because there's something uncanny about her. Even as gods go, she's not like other gods. Yeah, but you're right. Hera is in no way the biological mother of Athena, and yet they're the tightest alliance among the gods.
And do you plan to write more, kind of convert more poetry into prose? Because I have a suggestion.
Oh, what's the suggestion?
The suggestion is the Shahnameh, which is the Book of the Kings by Ferdowsi. It's a Persian classic, and it's fantastic. It's epic. He wrote it for like 30 years, so.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, Book of the Kings, right?
Book of the Kings, right?
Yeah, it's Shahnameh. I can.
Okay, yes.
See, I'm conveying the text. All right. No, that sounds great. Yeah, it's like I've had people ask me, "Are you going to do the Odyssey now?" I have to say, it doesn't seem like such a natural progression. The Iliad is one thing, and the Odyssey is very much another thing. I mean, the way I always think of the Odyssey is this English one-panel cartoon which shows Odysseus standing at the mouth of the cave, with this big grinning, hungry Cyclops, and he's turning his head back towards his men and saying, "It's just one damn thing after another." Oh.
Yes.
It's a podcast question. When will there be part 2 on the Russian Civil War? And parallel to that, why is Dune so resonant with the two of you?
I think there was a kind of part 2 of the Russian Civil War, kind of, with the Polish Soviet War.
Not good enough.
That's no, I know. And actually, the reality is there could be probably 5 or 10 parts, but there should be,
didn't know it was that popular. It makes you nervous a little bit when you do something like the Russian Civil War. John,
yeah, but we're a business here. You want Russian Civil War? We got Russian Civil War.
Customers own you.
Sure. Okay. What was the other part of the question?
What is Dune? How does Dune resonate with the two of you so much?
Okay, well, look, we have very different answers. What can I say? Because I failed puberty? I mean, it's like, and that doesn't go for Mark. But I was a Tolkien kid all the way. Dune came later, and nothing could displace Tolkien for me. But as for why Dune resonates so much, and maybe in some ways continues to resonate into middle age, it's because I was an American male child, and we have a proverb in my culture, only one team can win the Super Bowl, and it roughly translates to only one boy can be the Kwisatz Haderach. And as we talked about in the episode on Dune, which by the way I performed from a McDonald's in Budapest. Yeah. If you rent in Budapest, be careful. Anyway, so as we said there's a tremendous emphasis both in the culture that we come from and in naturally in the in the science fiction that that culture produced on the testing of male children at adolescence or just before adolescence, and that's one of the most striking things about Dune. You see it in a sort of popularized form in The Matrix, where Keanu Reeves either is or is not, or they call him the One or something fairly pedestrian term. Because that Haderach is much better, and I mean, this sounds delusive, but one of the things that I believe about text, especially as a science fiction fan, is that what I'm willing to believe depends on a million factors, from the time of day to what I've consumed during the day, meaning food as well as everything else. And I think a lot of people believe in Dune. I think there are people who believe in Dune a little too much, as there are people who believe in all kinds. I don't know, probably realist novels about divorce a little too much. You can believe a little too much in any kind of genre, but the idea that you will be tested and this will determine a lot of your future was simple fact, where we come from, and what science fiction does, rather than try to shrink that down in a modernist way to prove that we're all just miserable little liars and nobodies, is to amplify it and literally put it on a universe-wide scale. So Mark has his own answer.
Well, as John knows, I've never been actually a huge fan of sci-fi or fantasy, except for a few books, and I can't think exactly why. As I've been thinking about it as you were answering, first of all, why did I like Dune? Because I didn't know who David Lynch was when that movie came out, but I was kind of blown away by that movie, and everybody, the few people in the audience, were so angry and disappointed. And I thought, this is the most incredible. I didn't care about the flaws. I just thought this is the most incredible movie I've ever seen. Baron Harkonnen is the archetype for so many horrible people. And yeah, so that for me is why. But I think I didn't like sci-fi and fantasy much when I was younger, because for the most part I read the wrong books. And most of what I read at that time was, I don't know, kind of humorless. And I always liked gory comedy, for lack of it, like gory comedy or horror, things that, books that that just produce a really powerful, strong impression. And more, I think, comic than gore, but actually both of them. And I didn't really come across books like that. If I had come across a Philip K. Dick book when I was younger, it might have completely changed my life.
Right.
Because it's a direct line into the particular kind of horribleness that you grew up in the Bay Area, I think. And it's funny as hell too.
Yeah, and on that note, I don't know how many people know another Philip K. Not one of the better Philip K. Dick novels. It's called Our Friends from Frolics 8, and it begins with the testing of I think a 10-year-old boy, and this testing will determine everything about his future. Only PKD doesn't involve the Bene Gesserit or any of that. It's just going into a test center and having your intelligence and your ESP powers tested. And those who don't score high on either of those are non-people. And this is only about that far away from what was actually going on at the time. So, yeah, it's not hard to see how that came in. There are other aspects of Dune that obviously mean a lot. There's massive war. There's drugs, which must flow, which is always the best kind, and there's a kind of confirmed megalomania, and I think most male adolescents are, in their heart of hearts, complete megalomaniacs, and a great deal of people who are not male adolescents feel the same way. But it's a chance. I mean, look, I was teaching and reading modernist poetry while reading science fiction for pleasure, and it's a very disorienting experience. It's mainly, modernist poetry is people from very upper echelons of the culture telling you that everything is almost literally garbage. You know, the poem I knew best was Wallace Stevens' Man on the Dump, which literally puts someone on the dump and has a whole stanza describing the contents of the dump, contemptuous detail. And it's almost like the Tolstoy-Dostoevsky distinction. Tolstoy takes people from very high ranks and squashes them into something like the Doors from Phantasm. Whereas Dostoevsky takes these dirty, sort of proto-Dresden people who haven't washed all year and makes them kind of epic figures. And science fiction does something more like that. It takes people who may not be epic figures in IRL and shows them that there is an epic dimension to their lives. I don't think you have to go with one or the other. I want with both, but it's kind of nice to have that other thing.
Yes.
So when you're talking about the gods and how people in Greek times fear them, I guess going back to like traditional Judaism, you have Sheol, which is the underworld where everything is basically similar to the Greek underworld, that there's no hope and there's no future. Do you think that one of the reasons why a lot of the Greek and like Sumerian religions died out and didn't have great play was because they didn't offer people like something greater than God squabbling and you just being a pawn for other like higher powers pleasure?
First of all, I had no idea that I'm a bad Jew, but I had no idea there was hell because I remember my rabbi saying, "Oh, Jews, hell doesn't apply to Jews." And then I told my Catholic friends, and they all wanted to convert to Judaism. But I don't know, John, you want to answer?
Would not have helped.
I actually believe it. The sad thing is I believe in hell more than anything.
It's very unpopular because nobody wanted to go to Sheol.
Okay, so I'll look it up.
Yeah, there are other Greek traditions, but as far as I know, they're a bit later and a bit less broadly believed than the idea of. Well, I always think of a Flannery O'Connor line when thinking of the Iliad's concept of hell. Anyway, Flannery O'Connor says, "You can't be any poorer than dead," and that is almost literally what Achilles says to Odysseus when Odysseus comes down to the underworld to visit him. That is the worst you can be. As bad as it is up here, it's going to be worse down there. But what you said sounds very plausible to me, but I'm not I'm not quick to say if it's true because the tradition you mentioned, I know very little about it.